Hey everyone, this is Lucian Rienzi. I'm here with Luigi. And Luigi, I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name's Luigi. I started off my journey, you could call it, down the online business route about 12 months back, 11 months back. Uh, Back then, I was pretty much at zero, and since then, gone from zero all the way through to about 30K we did in revenue last month and the month before that as well. So, quite excited to say that the progress has really been made. The hard work paid off. Took a lot to get here, but definitely happy that I am here now.
Awesome. So Luigi, let's keep this interview tailored towards like giving value to agency owners. So let's not be afraid to talk about like agency stuff. So talk to me about like, because I know you very well, but talk to me about like the first agency you started and then the one that you're running now, the differences between them, the things that you learned, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the first agency that I started off with was doing basic marketing for martial arts gyms. And that allowed me to get a lot of reps in terms of cold calling because that was the best way to reach that niche. And I'd say that cold calling in the beginning, when for me, I didn't have much capital to invest in a fancy email system or automations, all that good stuff. And so doing cold calling was A, the lowest cost thing I could do, but B, I think it did a lot for improving my ability to sell because just getting meetings booked is a sale in and of itself, right? And so that's what I did in the beginning. I think I made over 4,000 cold calls within, the span of a few months there. So it was a grind for sure. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it was the most engaging thing in the world, but that taught me a lot in terms of, I'd say, mental resilience to get me now to the point where I'd say about 4 or 5 months ago, I partnered up with a buddy. We sort of took on a different model where now we're helping companies raise capital. And so still sort of similar agency model there in that sense, but instead of trying to sell, a business's services like you would traditionally see in SMMA, now we're trying to sell the idea of a company to an investor who's looking to invest into it. And so it's similar in that sense, but different. A couple of key things there that I think have allowed us to be successful is setting up proper email outreach campaigns. No, don't be mistaken. Cold calling is great in the beginning, but eventually, you're going to be limited by your time there. And to really scale up, you need to start deploying some other systems in order to help you generate more meetings. And then as well as what I really learned is that you need to go after markets that have a good amount of cash to spend, right? Martial arts gyms, I learned over time, they're simply, they're not doing too well. They're not making that much money. They don't have excessive marketing budgets, etc. Versus companies that we're working with now, startups that are looking to raise, multi-millions worth of dollars in investment. They have the money to spend on an upfront fee to pay for a system build out and to get things running. They're willing to work with a company that maybe doesn't have as much experience if the compensation is largely tied to success. And so it's really about positioning yourself there and, doing that correct market research to make sure you're not putting yourself into a market that really, really limits you in the beginning before you even get going.
And so what was your sort of motivation or like main reason for starting the first agency? Was it just because like you saw someone else on YouTube that was talking about SMMA, or have you always wanted to start a business? What was like the one thing that like pushed you over the edge and actually made you take that first action to start that first business?
It's interesting because I'd say it really like online, trying to make money online for me would go back to almost 18 months ago, if not a little bit more. But back then I was just maybe dabbling a little bit with e-commerce. Admittedly, I was in Tate's Hustlers University there. So I think that's where I got my first sort of glimpse of that. And so from there, it's really about the desire for, financial independence and not needing to work a job for the entire career. So that's really when I started dabbling. Now the agency route just kind of came about as I started seeing some videos on YouTube, people talking about this model that seemed to work really well. And so from there, I figured, okay, let's give it a shot here. And so found some different resources, met different people in community, such as Lucian here, and was able to kind of string things together in a way that allowed, this path to be the one that really got me off the ground. Whereas everything leading up to that really it wasn't serious work that I was doing. It was more, I wasn't as committed to it. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I think that that's sort of a big factor there as well.
Makes sense. Okay, so you started that first agency, and then as you said, you sort of ditched that idea because the opportunity really wasn't there. All of the like the founders of these arts gyms, they didn't really have enough money to spend on the ads. And then I'm sure the problem is also it's like if you run the ads and they work well and they fill up the gym, then they don't need your ads anymore. And then you kind of either way, you're going to lose the client, right? That's if you can even get them in the first place. Okay, so then you started this second agency, and essentially what you guys do is you help businesses find investors, right? It's like pretty straightforward. Obviously, you charge like a fee, and then you also charge a success fee, right? And so, what was like, again, what was like the moment where you were like, I've got to stop this with the martial arts gyms. I'm stopping everything that has to do with that. And then I'm moving to this new opportunity. What was the one thing that really, again, triggered you to want to do that?
Well, I think for context, just, I'd say a background in finance as well. And so I was interested in martial arts, and that's what tended me to pick the niche. But as you mentioned, right, even if, if I deliver good service to them, they're limited in terms of capacity at their school. And B, a lot of these guys I found were really doing it just out of passion. They weren't doing it to really make a killing, right? And so if you got them to full capacity, they just say, okay, I'm good now. Like we're not even going to go look at a second facility, right? And so I think it was just sort of the culmination of enough months speaking to enough of these martial arts gym owners to really realize that the market opportunity here isn't big enough for sort of the revenue goals that I have and the financial goals. And so then my buddy had started in on what we're currently doing. He was doing it himself. He had found different resources online to help him get started, and he was starting to see some interest there. And so then quickly we kind of just partnered up to really start crushing things in April, May of this past year.
And what was the one key takeaway out of, let's just say, the past? Because you've been in like the SMMA space for less than a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's been like the one key takeaway, like the biggest lesson you've learned from this experience, like over the past year?
I'd say that understanding the lag between when you're doing the right actions and when you actually see the reward and the payoff for said actions, right? Because you can't just, in the beginning, you're just trying to figure out what do I actually need to do here? What's the right thing to do? And, that takes time in and of itself. But then let's say the first day that you nail down everything that you need to do and you start doing that, the results are still going to be lagged, right? The thing that you need to look at is the inputs, what you're doing, and make sure that what you're doing is high value tasks. It's in alignment with success. You have mentors or people in a community that you're able to speak to that are ahead of you that can help you confirm that what you're doing is correct, you're on the right path. And then it's just simply waiting for the results to come, right? Money's a lagging indicator. And so it takes time. And so it's just about making sure that once you nail down what's right, you can't be impatient and then start to change things because you think the results should come sooner. It's really about detaching from that and just focusing on the inputs and having faith that the output, which is the money or whatever it is, will come at a later point in time. And you just need to keep busy in the meantime doing what you know you need to do.
So there's like your inputs, lag time, delay, and then the output. That's where you're going to get the money or the result or whatever.
The reward, yeah.
I think the question most people are going to have is, how do I know if I'm doing the right inputs? Because any like input, like how are you supposed to judge, right? It's like, how do I know that if I do this input repeatedly every single day, if I then wait some time, how do I know if that's actually going to work out and give me the result?
I think it's about finding people that are ahead of you and that have already done what you're looking to achieve and asking them for help. That's simply the easiest way to do it, right? Because there's a quote from Hormozy that when he was selling, Gym Launch, for example, if anybody knows his story, and one of the objection overcomes he used to use was, you're gonna pay for this program either way. You're just gonna pay for it in either time or you're going to pay for it with money. And so it's about which of those two resources do you value more, right? And I think everybody knows that, rich people, the way they think, they value their time way more than they value money. And so it's simply about, okay, you can definitely do it yourself and put in all the time and you'll pay by learning the hard way and making all the mistakes, and it's just going to take you significantly longer. Or you can perhaps pay somebody, a mentor or somebody that's done it before, to help guide you and give you that advice to get you there sooner, right? And so it's really just about which currency do you want to pay in, but you need to pay either way. There's no way around that.
If someone was in your position, let's just say like when you started your first SMMA, right? So they know they want to start an agency. They've maybe picked their niche already, and they kind of know more or less what to do, right? And maybe now they've heard this where it's like, okay, I just got to pick the right things to do. I'll ask people that are ahead of me. I know what to do now. I'm going to do them. There'll be a time delay and then the output. So they're in that position now. What would you say though is maybe like two or three key skills or like absolute like fundamental concepts that they must stick by, that you also stuck by, that allowed you to get to where you are? For example, if someone knew what you just said, right? If someone knew that and then they tried it for a couple of weeks, but they weren't like resilient and like they were very emotional about it, and that they would end up quitting. So it's like, what were like two or three key kind of mental states, like whatever you want to call it, two or three key things that you always stuck by, which now in hindsight, you're like, oh wow, those are the things right there that allowed me to keep going and get to my goal.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, not to tie in religion, I think I'll try to extrapolate the point broader than that, is having faith, either if you're religious in God, in that if you put in the inputs, things will pay off. But even if you don't believe, that's totally fine. If you believe in karma, which I think everybody can really get behind, that's that it's the same principle that applies. If you know genuinely, if you're able to go to bed at night knowing that you gave it your all every day, and that you're doing what you know or what you've been told is the right things to do, and you're confident that you gave it your all that day, it's just about simply having the faith that good things happen to good people. You're going to be rewarded for the hard work. And so that's a big mental frame for me. Being a little bit more religious, it would be having faith in God, right? But either way, you can extrapolate that out to just broader, the universe, etc. So that was definitely one thing. The second one as well, I'd say, is definitely needing to have people around you that you're speaking to, maybe not on a daily basis. Maybe they don't live in the same place as you, but even just people you can text online, check in with, having some sort of community around is so important. Because fundamentally, if you're choosing to go down the road, the agency route, right, I can just speak to my own personal experience. I'd say 98% of the people I know in real life aren't going down that route, right? So you can't talk to them about this stuff. You're going through it, you're putting in the hours, and nobody can really relate to that. Maybe they're talking about the latest Netflix series that they're watching, or what funny stuff happened at the bar last night while you were sitting at home in your room making cold calls to a time zone that was still awake, still early, right? So it's about finding the people that are doing what you're doing and sort of are in that stage, because I think you'll be able to relate a lot to them, and seeing that other people are also in your position, they're also struggling, they're feeling the same thing. It really takes the loneliness out of it, and I think the loneliness is what can really discourage you if you don't have people to speak to, right? To share the wins, also share sort of the struggles, right? And to check you on that and be like, hey, you said you were going to do this until it paid off. Now that it's getting difficult, this is the hardest part about it. And this is what separates the people that succeed versus the people that don't succeed. And so you just got to push through that. And having somebody there to remind you of that is very, very important, right? It's definitely not going to be a one-man show. You can't get there without any guidance, any support. It's just simply not going to happen. You need that.
So when we like start things, we oftentimes have expectations of like maybe not only how things are going to pan out, but like what's required from our end, right? So we maybe think, oh my God, cold calling is going to be so difficult. and sales is going to be so difficult. But then once I have the client, I know how to deliver the service. It's like we have all of these different types of expectations before we actually start taking action. And so in your case, Luigi, what was one thing that you thought would be like super tough and super painful that then once you actually started doing it, you were like, oh, this wasn't that bad. I was like overreacting about it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say the scapegoat could almost be cold calling because I think that probably would be the best example. Just because, to be honest, there are times when you're cold calling and it is as difficult as you expect it to be. You'll have days where people just aren't answering the phone right, and you're forced to sit there and make 150 dials, and you're not having many conversations, right? So there's definitely, I'd say that that's the best example where that it can be in alignment with your expectations, but oftentimes, you can go on streaks where you'll make 10 calls and you'll book 2 meetings out of that. And it's just like you feel on top of the world there. And even if, the rest of your cold calling session, nothing really comes of it, you still experience that high, right? I mean, fundamentally, cold calling is just talking to people, right? Asking them some questions, seeing if you can get them intrigued enough to jump on a sales call, right? And so nothing about the task is difficult. We do that every day. We ask questions to people every day, right? We try to get them interested in continuing to talk to us if you're meeting new people. So nothing about it is overly difficult. It's just definitely the stigma around it. But if I can just go deeper on this, I think removing expectation, not maybe not entirely, but in general, removing expectation is almost necessary, I'd say, to a certain degree, because you only you only quit if you expect that you should have got there sooner, right? Like if you just give, if I just give a random example of if you were told to walk, 10 miles in one direction and you get to the next town, right? If you walk 10 miles and you don't get there, you're going to be tempted to quit. But if somebody just says walk and you keep walking in that direction, you will get to the town without sort of that distance being a factor, then you won't get discouraged because you weren't expecting it to be, right? And so it just wouldn't be a factor, right? That's a very basic example, but it extrapolates out to everything, right? It's the pain that we experience is just because of the discrepancy between our expectations and reality, right? So if you can adjust your expectations, you can remove a lot of the pain that you experience. And saying that sounds great, admittedly, but doing it in practice is still something that I struggle with. I'm sure, Lucian, you struggle with that as well. Maybe not so much on the business side of things, but like it applies everywhere in life, not just in business. And so I think that's a big principle that just needs to be worked on day in and day out to get better at.
Yeah, you manage your expectations because it's why I always tell to people it's like happiness is just when there's a misalignment between like your expectations and reality. That's when you're
Yeah.
going to feel unhappy or feel like trash. And so that's a really good point. How do you think someone should go about just doing the work? Like if someone again knows what to do, but they get in front of their computer, they do work for about 10 minutes, and then maybe because they have monkey brain or whatever, they then end up doing something else or quitting or going on their phone. Like, because I know you quite well personally. I know you're like hyper disciplined. I've seen your calendar. It's fucking crazy. So it's like, how are you able to just do the work and just get it done without diverting your attention? How do you do that?
There's a quote, I forget who it's from, but the difference between millionaires and average people is that when a millionaire makes a mistake, they immediately correct it versus average people will just repeat the mistake, not even realizing it, right? And so for me, it's not about, okay, how do I stay off my phone? It's actually about, okay, the times that I have gone on my phone when I should be working. Why did I go on my phone? Is it because my phone was in arm's reach? Was it because notifications were turned on? I heard a buzz. What can I change so that next time I don't do it again, right? And so it's really just I take the opposite approach where it's just like instead of trying to think of all the different ways that I can like safeguard things and prevent distractions, it's more so just about okay, when I see a distraction, how do I remove it so that next time it doesn't come up, right? And then eventually if you keep doing that over a long enough time period, there is truly only so many distractions that you'll find. And then eventually you get to the point where they're pretty much all removed. And the only thing that you have left to do is either work or stare at your computer screen. But I think work would be a little bit more engaging than the latter. So that's where you just end up doing the work, and that's it. I mean, it's also about taking baby steps as well in the beginning. For me, I was never a big social media scroller even before I really started. And so for me it was easy, but I know I got buddies that will sit on social media for hours a day, right? And so to go from that, especially TikTok, like I didn't even have TikTok. I haven't had TikTok since probably pre-COVID, right? So for me, going from where I was at was already, I'd say, in a decent state of mind to now just applying my focus on something else. It wasn't as bad of a jump compared to somebody that maybe just doom scrolls every day and they have a lot of work to do. And so then it's about taking baby steps. Okay, how do we focus for 30 minutes at a time here? Okay, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, and just increase that until you can focus for hours on end and able to do the work, right? That comes back to expectations. If you are that person that's been doing that, you can't expect to just sit down and magically focus for and put in 12 hours of work a day. Like it's just not going to happen. You need to build up to that. And so there's a lot of retraining that's involved. And I'd say not getting discouraged with that process is the biggest thing.
Good point. Now, what were like the maybe two or three biggest unseen hurdles you faced? Because earlier we talked about the things where like you expected them to be tough, like cold calling, and then when you just kind of get on with it, it's not too bad. What were maybe a few things that you either didn't consider at all that turned into big obstacles that you had to solve and go around, or things that you were like, yeah, that will be easy, but it ended up being like a big challenge again? What were those things?
I maybe one would be actually delivery when I was doing the martial arts stuff.
Yeah, I
I'd
remember
say,
that.
but I don't want to say that and scare people because fundamentally, if you're starting out, the only thing you should be caring about is booking meetings and sales. Like when some, I don't know who said it before. I think a lot of people have repeated it. Get clients and then figure out how to deliver. Like that's the order of doing things. Do not stress about delivering until you have clients to deliver for. But with that being said, when I did start getting clients, delivering was definitely a problem in the beginning. But same thing with sales, with cold calling. You're just knowing that fundamentally you'll get better over time helps you, I think, bear the short-term, losses, short-term struggles there with that. So that was definitely one of the things. Um, another one, another one could probably just be trying to, I'd say almost figuring out how to like curb your own expectations. Like I think that even though it's kind of more of like a meta point, like trying to limit your expectations to prevent yourself from getting upset or discouraged is so difficult to do. Like you think you can just flip a switch and just turn it off, but it's all subconsciously linked, right? And so even if, you don't you're trying to remove that expectation because it's just sitting there subconsciously sometimes. There's just it can be so difficult to remove it, right? And so again, that just comes with a lot of conscious effort and work. Um, but other than that, I wouldn't say that there was any other real hurdles there like that were unforeseen, right? I mean, lack of support from maybe some of the people around you, but I think if you listen to enough stuff on it, that's almost to be expected just because you're changing, they're not, they're gonna try to hold you back, crabs in a barrel, that sort of thing. And so I feel like that was sort of expected. It doesn't change the fact that maybe when it does come up, it's still gonna maybe bother you a little bit, but I wouldn't say that that was unforeseen. I'd say that those would probably be the biggest two unforeseen challenges.
Was there a moment? So this probably would have been when you started your second eight, or when you started your second agency, the one you're running now. Was there a moment where everything felt like it clicked and it was like the way I've had this moment, the way I had it in my head is like all the switches are up and it's just like full steam ahead. It's like, wait a minute, I found the niche. I found the service, like the thing we're going to deliver. I found the offer. I found the acquisition method. I found the conversion method when everything just kind of aligned and like you could feel it. Did you have one of those moments?
Yeah, I'd say that that would be July for us, 2 months ago, because that's when we first did, real revenue in that sense where we broke. broke above 30K in revenue that month, I'd say that that's really when everything aligned. Because up until that point, we were getting a lot of meetings. It was just we were having difficulties selling, right? And I think demonstrating expertise in a new industry, it just again comes back to expectations. You need to be able to take a bunch of sales calls in the beginning in a new market and just expect them to not go well because you simply just don't know what you're talking about, right? But then as you talk to people, start to go get more reps in, you start to say things and then identify patterns. Okay, if I say this in this order, they seem to really like that. They agree with that. It makes sense. It's in alignment with how they speak. And over time, you just need to take a bunch of sales calls, right? I think, there are so many different examples of people. I think one that comes to mind would be, I think Charlie Morgan said he did, 50 sales calls in his first niche before actually closing a sale, right? 50 sales calls. That's a 2% conversion rate, right? So it's like just understanding that once that clicked for us and that came together, that's when we really started to print, so to speak.
So let's just say someone is currently running an agency and they're feeling a bit stuck. And they're feeling stuck perhaps because like they're booking appointments and like the clients that they have, they're giving them okay results, but they can't quite figure out the middle part, which is how do I just like convert these appointments into clients? So it's like they pretty much have a sales problem, but in their minds, maybe they also have like a niche problem or an offer problem or a positioning problem or whatever it is, right? So someone in that situation, what do you recommend that they do? Like, how do they perform a self-diagnosis of, again, their current situation? And then how do they proceed from there? Because the two outcomes are like either they stick with this current opportunity, this niche with this kind of offer, either they stick with that and they try and make it work, or they just completely pivot. What do you think they should do in that case?
I'd say that first you got to work backwards up the chain, right? And so first would be, okay, how do we change the sales process here? Do I need to change my sales script? Start at that level because that's the easiest thing to change. Then if that doesn't yield results, then maybe go look at your offer and reevaluate that. How can we entice things, right? Either mitigate risks, make it even more bold, but also within the capability that you can deliver on, etc. And then if that doesn't work, then only at that point would I consider switching niche because as we literally just discussed, in terms of, that hurdle for me was when we switched niches and we were taking a bunch of sales calls and couldn't close. That's going to happen regardless of niche. If you switch niches, you need to be prepared for sales to be slow for, depending on how many meetings you're booking a day or a week, for multiple weeks, multiple months even, right? And so you need to make sure that you're in a situation where you can absorb that sort of slowdown on the sales side if you switch niches, right? But fundamentally, that's what it was for me is that I needed to really evaluate this, and you just need to be super logical with it and look at your niche. Don't be emotional and say, make emotional arguments like, oh, they don't want to buy or, they don't have the money to buy my thing or, like actually look at it logically, track your data and figure out, okay, is this actually a good niche to be in, right? Look at all the factors that make up a good niche, right? Making sure that there's demand for what they're selling, right? Like for me, selling martial arts last year just wasn't even, I wouldn't even say it was in high demand because right now we're going through high inflationary period. People cut unnecessary expenses. Martial arts is not necessary, right? That was one factor that I was looking at it. Also look at, are the owners of these businesses, are they really looking to grow? Are they ambitious or are they the type of people that will settle for hitting X revenue target, right? Are they capacity constrained, right? Like, do they have a facility and there's not much to go, right? Where if they hit that target, then you're sort of done, and it can only be like a 3-month gig, and then you need to go find new clients because you want to find clients that you can work with for the long time and get a lot of value from. And then there's a couple other criteria, right? But I don't think I need to ramble on too much. I'm sure that there's a lot of resources out there that you can
Sure.
find to help with niche selection.
So just be logical about it, pretty much is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Don't just like jump the gun and be like, screw it, we're doing something new because like you just said from your experience, and I can confirm that experience is like when you start in a new niche, it's like the first few 10, 20, 50 sales calls are going to suck. Even if you're good at
Yeah,
sales, it will help if you're good at sales, but it's like you don't know the language. You don't necessarily, unless you've done months of market research, you don't necessarily know all of their pain points, right? So
exactly.
it's going to be a slow process at the beginning, but I'm sure, as you can attest to, when everything kind of lines up together, I don't know if you've had this experience, you probably have. When everything kind of lines up, it almost just becomes a game. It's like, I remember for me, it was so like I had like such like monkey brain, and I was just so like, I don't know if this is going to work. Do I do this, blah, 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 blah. And then when it lines up, it's like you suddenly like have complete clarity. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. If we just do this and this and this and keep doing it and do these inputs, this is probably going to be the result in this range. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's the most difficult part is putting together the formula, right? Once you put together the formula, it's just simply about increasing the inputs, right? Until you hit a constraint and then maybe you need to change the formula a little bit, right? But I think if we're talking about earlier stage aids and agency owners, right, probably up to 50 or 100K per month in revenue, you can probably, once you crack the formula, you just need to increase inputs and you'll get there, right? It's not, you don't probably won't need to change much.
Absolutely. Now, maybe a controversial question. I know how I would answer this question. I want to see how you're going to answer it. So there's different kind of like skill sets and different kind of like key things you need in order to pretty much run any business, right? It's like, let's talk about agencies. You need to like set appointments with potential clients. You then need to sell your like services or your offer to those clients. So sales, and then you have delivering on what you promised, service delivery. Now, let's just say you could be the best in the world at only one of them: setting appointments, converting appointments and turning them into clients, so sales or service delivery. You can pick only one of those three. Which one would you be the best in the world at?
But sales is sales by far because I think sales is the most important skill set to learn. A, because it applies outside of actual business, right? That's day to day, right? Like you're selling yourself to a girl that you meet as you're going grocery shopping.
Not
You're selling
literally.
yeah, 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 not literally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. You're selling yourself to just new friends that you're meeting, right? You need to, if you're going for a job interview, you're selling yourself. Like sales is everything. And the beautiful thing about that is there are a lot of, positions, right? And so this is the conversation of, okay, do I want to be the founder of an agency and really have that true freedom, or would I be fine settling for a high paying, closing role for an online business, right? Where you still have location freedom. Maybe you're working for somebody else, but the income potential there for those sort of roles is absolutely massive. And especially with where AI is heading right now and coming, sales will be the last thing that goes from an automation standpoint, right? Appointment booking can largely be automated. There are these wicked systems out there that can send all these personalized DMs, personalized emails, right? Setting appointments via email, right? I don't think we're far out from having complete automation there in that sense, right? So setting appointments wouldn't be a thing. And then fulfilling on the client side of things is interesting as well, because depending on what your fulfillment looks like, some of that could also be automated in in the coming future as well, right? Sales will be the last thing to go with where we're at right now, and so it's by far the best place to invest your time and your money in terms of actually getting either mentorship, just putting the time in to learn how to get better at, because that's the one skill set that I see sticking around for the longest period.
And so 7 or 8 months ago, when you started this journey, if you had to rank your sales abilities on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you have put them 7 months ago?
I'd probably give myself a three, maybe, because I feel like I've been a decent talker at least even before I started doing sales, and so I think that would help me not be at a one, but definitely was not good at identifying the pain points, figuring out where do I need to dig deeper here to pull up a little bit more pain here. Where do I, okay, that's enough on that point. Let's move to the next point. How do I tie in my process to what they've mentioned, they like, or some of their pain points, what they don't like. There's so much that goes into it that I just wasn't even picking up on in the beginning.
What about now? Right now, 10th of September 2024, where do you rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10?
Probably like a six, maybe
That's
six or seven.
conservative. That's like really conservative. Like,
That's I think there's a lot.
you're pretty good at sales now, Luigi.
No, but I think there's well, fundamentally you can never be at a 10. And I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
if I was at a nine, I think that I'd be closing larger deals than what I'm closing right
Probably.
now. I think there's still a lot of room to improve. So maybe I'm being a bit conservative there, but I just think that there are still so many mistakes that I find in my own sales calls when I'm reviewing them myself. And so then who knows when you have real professionals, like when you've taken a look at some of my sales calls and you're like, what the heck are you doing? What is this? What is this? Right. So there's still enough of those moments that I'd say that a six or a seven is justifiable. Even though I
Yeah, you're
have
right.
made a lot of improvement, there's still so much more to go. And it's really a never-ending game, right? As is most things in life, is that it's a never-ending game of improvement. Just like a while back, you know, what was it? Urgency pricing used to be a big thing. It used to work a bunch, and now we've transitioned. The markets in general just do not react well at all. They see right through that, right? And so even if you do get to like a nine, 9.5, there's always going to be new market developments. And if you're not staying on top of those things, you're going to quickly fall off. So that would be
Absolutely.
my comments on that.
That's a good point. What's like your one sales tip specifically for agency owners?
If I had to nail it down to one tip for
Or
agency
or a
owners,
couple, but just like the real like main
yeah, the
thing.
real needle movers. I'd say, and this is actually probably one I don't follow as well as I should. I'd say reviewing your own calls, which is something in the beginning I hardly ever did just because of other time commitments. And even now, I don't do a good job of either. But I'd say honestly, you can identify, like even without a mentor, you can probably just identify from reviewing your own calls, how many mistakes you made, like what things you're saying wrong. And if you genuinely sit there in front of your computer, throw away all distractions and forge, if you receive an objection on a call, right, and you review it afterwards, I guarantee you, if you sit down with no distractions in front of that computer and just figure out how to handle it, you will figure out how to handle objections, right? So I wouldn't say it's anything about trying to get better at objection handling because you can figure that out by reviewing calls. Same with your tonality as well. Like you get live feedback from your prospects, right? If you say something and it comes off weird, you'll pick it up. We're smart enough socially. I think everybody's socially smart enough and socially aware enough to notice when they say something and it doesn't come out right and people have a adverse reaction to it. Um, I mean, speaking with conviction would be another big one, but again, that's something that you can just pick up on. If you listen to your pitch and even you get bored listening to your own pitch, then you probably know that you need to
Yeah.
dial up the conviction, right? So I'd say that being really making the time for reviewing your calls and realizing that it's actually a high leverage activity rather than a low leverage activity is probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give. And that's also applied directly to myself.
That's a really good piece of advice. All right, Luigi, let's do one last thing before we go here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read out basically a list of words, and after every word, I just want you to tell me the first thing that pops into your mind. So it's
Sure.
like I think it's called like word association or something, okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just super rapid fire, okay?
All right.
All right. So the first one is work.
Difficult.
Fun.
Not to be had. You might need to restart this, to be honest. That
Why?
I'm not off to a hot start there, to be honest.
That's your answer, no?
Yeah, yeah.
We can go again if you want. Okay. You ready?
Yeah. No, this I was not I don't even know what I was expecting, to be honest.
But
You
you
want to
you
talk
gotta
about it?
just literally say the first thing that comes into your mind.
Yeah,
And if then you say, Lucian, don't put that in there, then I'll cut it out.
sure.
All right. So let's go again. So the first one is work.
Rewarding,
Fun.
occasional,
Pleasure.
Rarely.
Mind,
Set,
body,
built,
goal.
top priority.
Holiday.
Rarely.
Emotions.
Generally to be ignored.
Happiness.
Only through achievement.
That's a good one. Actually, I don't know if that's a good one. Shouldn't you be happy? Shouldn't you be happy regardless of what happens? That's debatable, isn't it? Because it's also you've got to.
No, no, wait. We can argue this. We can argue this right now because achievement, if you set the achievement for yourself as the input, then you can be happy off your own inputs. If the achievement at the end of the day is doing all the work that you said that you would do, then you can be happy with yourself. It depends on how you define achievement.
It's a good point. That's a really good point. That's really good. All right, next one, communication,
Very key.
agency,
Good stepping stone.
freedom,
Desirable.
money,
Necessary to freedom.
time,
Very valuable.
keyboard,
Say that again.
keyboard,
Keyboard?
keyboard.
Oh, keyboard. Input.
I have this weird thing with a keyboard. Whenever I think about a keyboard, I think about like it's an extension of like my hands because like literally 60% of my adult life, even teenage life, has been spent attached to a keyboard. And I don't think anyone thinks about that. How much time your fingers spend on a keyboard. Isn't that crazy?
You're pushing buttons to make money appear into bank accounts. That's how it
It
goes.
it's kind of crazy, no? You push buttons, you say some stuff, and then money appears. Right? Like,
Ain't that the goal?
yeah. All right, let's keep I have a few more. Fake.
Sure. Faith?
Fake.
Fake.
Fake. Like FAKE. Fake.
Not me.
Authentic.
Desirable.
Honesty.
Necessary.
Passion.
Debatable as if it's required or not to be successful.
Speed limits.
To be broken.
Rules.
To be bent.
Laws.
To be followed.
I almost got you to be like, yeah, to be broken. All right, Luigi. So finally, let's just say that you had the opportunity to give yourself advice 12 months ago. So present day Luigi can give Luigi 1 year ago some advice. What would you say?
I'd say be patient is the biggest thing, and that circles back to expectations with what we talked about earlier. I'd say trust yourself. Like fundamentally, if you can't trust yourself, trust your mind, control your mind, all those things, if you can't do that, then you're just gonna be a victim to what life throws at you. But I think to anybody and to me at that point in time that had decided to go down the agency route and take matters into my own hands, it's simply trust yourself to make things work, right? I think that there was times where I didn't know if ends were going to meet in a given month with business expenses, living expenses versus what revenue was, right? And when it came time to it, I made sales in order to make sure that ends meet, right? Ends met. So I'd say the biggest thing is trust yourself, because without that, then yeah, you're not going to be able to surface and survive the difficult times that come. And fundamentally, I'd say just I'd say developing discipline is just the biggest thing, and really lean on that. And it's almost about rewiring your mind to enjoy it. I get up at 6 to go to the gym every day before starting to work. And I'm at the point now where it's just for me, it's just like an enjoyment thing. Like it's more difficult for me to wake up and not do that versus than it is to actually get up and do it now at this point. Like I feel worse about myself. And so you just really need to hack your mind in that sense. And again, that stuff takes time, but if you can just trick your mind into a lot of these different beliefs that are positive and will yield success. I think the one we discussed about achievement and tying it to the inputs rather than the outputs. And then if you define happiness as through only through achievement, then you'll always be happy. There's just so many different mental frameworks that I think are worth being studied and worth being applied because the frameworks are how you navigate the difficult times, and they will inevitably come. If it was an easy journey, everybody would go down it, right? And it would lead nowhere. The reason that it's valuable is because most people can't make it down the path, or rather make it up the mountain, so to speak, right? And so it's just about remember the reward that you're chasing and what really got you started, and keep that as sort of your Polaris star, so to speak, when times get difficult.
How much money did you spend on yourself, self-educating yourself in the past like 8 months?
Include the past 11 months because
Sure.
that's like a
Yeah,
reasonable
sure.
time frame. Is it 20? More. Nah, like 20K.
What was that spent on?
Courses, mentorship, primary, yeah, just those two buckets, I'd say.
And why did you decide? Because you didn't spend 20K up front, I assume, right? Like you got like you bought something. Why did you decide to keep purchasing information, advice, networking, access? Why did you decide to keep purchasing those things?
I just think that I was rewarded for doing it right. I think I made progress. I made the most progress when I was investing in myself. And so now it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if I've been rewarded for it in the past and I mean, if we just circle back quickly to when I bought Hustlers University, I think that that's the reason that I ended up going down sort of the outreach game. Like, for context, before I even joined the first program that I did join, I was doing outreach on Twitter, right, or X at the time to try to sell, AI automation services, right? And then from there, I got pitched to join a program. And then at that point in time, I joined the program. And then from there, that enhanced the mentorship, right? And I think just taking action along this every step of the way has it's rewarded me, right? And so that's why I continue to invest because I made the most progress from doing that. And as we discussed earlier, you either pay with time or you pay with money. And depending on how fast you want to get there, I want to get there fast because I have large goals. And so I'm going to try to pay down the debt there every step that I can. And yeah, just comes down to how you think, which one you value more.
It was worth it though, right? You spend 20K educating yourself and you now make 30K approximately per month. It's probably worth
I'd say that the bed mass checks out on that one. Yeah.
it. I'm not familiar with bed maths, but
Oh, you're not. Oh, it's you Europeans. I don't know if the Americans teach this as well, but in Canada, that's just the acronym we use for the order of operations.
but
So
BODMAS.
no, bed mass.
No,
So
we
the
call it BODMAS. I think we call it BODMAS or something like
Oh,
that.
okay.
BODMAS?
Brackets, exponents, division.
PEDMAS. Parentheses. We call them parentheses. PEDMAS, yeah. So, Luigi, I've intentionally left these questions like right to the end because I didn't want this to come across as like some sort of like marketing video or like self-promo video. But the reality of the situation is you really did go and like you can send me some screenshots. We can put them up, right? You really did go from like I remember when you were making like $500 per month serving the martial arts niche to now like 30K cash collected. So you made this journey. And the reality is, I mentored you along the way for like quite a substantial amount of it, right? And the reason why I bring this up is A, because I think in like this modern kind of era we're in, people have lost touch with the true value of mentorship because nowadays what everyone tries to do is just like pump out courses and sell them. And it's like a course is great. You log in somewhere, there's like videos and resources and guides. That's fantastic. But I feel like a lot of people could mentor other people, and a lot of people could be mentored, but everyone just wants that like fast, quick money. Boom, I make a sale, go watch the videos, I'm done with fulfillment. No one wants to take the time to mentor people anymore. And I'll tell you from my perspective, it was like really one of the best experiences I've ever had mentoring you. Like, so it wasn't the best mentoring experiences, it was one of the best experiences, period, I've ever had. Like, because there's like a fulfillment aspect of it, like self-fulfillment. I'm like, wow, like the things I was saying to Luigi really helped him. Like he went from here to there. Of course, he did that all by himself, but it's like I'm sure I played a kind of a part in it. And then the other thing that was fantastic to me was watching someone take what I said, internalizing it, and then just putting the work in, and then adapting it to their own style. And this is a point I want to bring up for anyone. If you're in a position and you desire something more than you have, which is pretty much everyone, right? Like even with the success you have now, you still want to get something else. If you're in that position and you're going out there and you're like seeking advice from other people, the biggest mistake I see people make is they pay for some advice, for example, and then they're given the advice, and then their ego gets in the way, and they don't just follow the advice. They're like, interesting. So you're the expert. That's what you're saying. I'll take that and I'll kind of just adapt it to my way of doing things. And the reason why they do that is again because of like ego, maybe because the advice they've been given is completely different to their way of doing things and it's like a new thing and it makes them uncomfortable. And what ends up happening is they waste a fantastic opportunity and they also probably just waste their time and money. And so that's one thing that was just really fantastic about you. And I really think everything you've said is hyper important and relevant and like crucial to your success. But the one thing I've noticed externally, because I'm not there day to day with you, I would
Yeah.
speak to you every week. The one thing I noticed externally was when you were told to do something, you just did it. Then after that, you formed your own opinion about it. And it's like, that's true when I was giving you advice, when you were in that course that you bought, it's like you just did the thing. And then once you got feedback and results, then you gave yourself the right to try and adapt it. But you just did it. And that's what I would say to anyone that's paying for advice or that wants to be mentored or that just wants to like improve in general. This is in any aspect of life. If someone who is in a position that you want to be in as well, if they're giving you advice, the best thing you can do is remove any kind of ego you have and remove any kind of like you formulating your opinions, your own opinion about what they're telling you, and instead just take the advice and try it and apply it. And then, like I said, form your own opinion and sort of make it your own. But I was wondering, from your side of things, talk to me about like the mentorship sort of experience as a whole, like just anything that comes up for you there. And then also what I just said, it's like the fact that you just like took the advice, did it, like what was your specific method there?
I think I'll touch on the latter point first. So it's funny because you don't need to go back very far history to realize that the only way people learned was through mentorship. Like before schools came around 100, 150 years ago, and I'm talking about, proper institutions, universities, etc. It was really all small group mentorship, right? And nowadays, all the trades are still sort of small group mentorship, right? And if you just look at presently in the trades, you don't see an electrician student being given advice and they're like, actually, I think it should be done this way. I'm going to put a little change on it. And then suddenly
Right.
the electricity in a building goes out, right? Like they just simply take it. And it's like you mentioned, for some reason, people think that this online space is different and that they should be given, creative liberty to make their own decisions, add their own spin on things. And it's like in the beginning, you're learning, just focus on learning. And so it's simply just about replicating what's been shown to you by the mentor. You replicate before you iterate. I'd say that's simplest rule to follow. And so if you trust the person and if you have a mentor, you've paid them money to give you advice. So I assume you trust them. If you trust them, you need to follow their advice. And then as you mentioned, you get feedback from the market and then you start to make the changes, right? Just for example, when we were working on ads to help me with client fulfillment, you gave me some different copy suggestions and I took them and I tested them. And only after did I test what you had given me did then I come back and say, hey, here's what we tested. These are the changes I think we should make now at this point after getting feedback of just listening to what you've said. What are your thoughts on that? And then it just progresses, right? But if you try to make changes from the offset, it just throws everything out of whack because if it doesn't work out and then you come back to the mentor and you say, here's what I did, the mentor's gonna be like, that's not what I told you to do. Why'd you put a change on it? And then it's just wasted time, wasted money, right? So I think that it's very important what you said there. In terms of takeaways about mentorship, I just fundamentally it's the fastest way to get you to where you want to be, right? Like you could go again, tying it back to the trades. Like I'm sure you could learn to whatever trade by studying a bunch of books, watching a bunch of YouTube videos. Like I'm sure you could figure it all out, but it's just about the time that it would take to do all that because you have to aggregate that information versus a mentor that's already in the position that you want to be in probably already has that information aggregated, right? Like that's why we buy courses. Fundamentally, so much of the information you find in courses can be found online. You buy it because it's aggregated in a nice format that it's easy to follow, easy to digest. And then mentorship is just an extension of that. It takes things one step further, and then it also tailors and personalizes that information to your specific situation, right? And so it's just simply about accelerating it, right? If you're fine making mediocre process not that much, in a timely manner there, then you just keep doing, what you're doing, maybe buy courses, but don't actually follow them, etc. Or don't buy courses at all, just watch YouTube. If you're looking to get there the fastest way possible, you got to find somebody that's already there that can help get you there. And just fundamentally, and just from a financial standpoint, because I think people, that's maybe where the biggest objection would be, right? If you just think about it 12 months from now, so I spent 20K give or take on courses, mentorship, etc., to get now to 30K a month in revenue. If I hadn't spent that 20K, I'd probably be sub 10K a month right now in revenue, just realistically, because it's only been 12 months. So it'd be costing me 20K every month, not
Good
having
point.
bought the mentorship or the courses, right? So it's really just betting on your future self to get it done and get to those revenue targets that you have, and you'll easily pay down the cost of the mentorship in the short term.
Really good point. Last question, Luigi. You can keep it super brief. What's next for you?
You got to keep going, keep getting better at sales, keep admittedly it is a new sort of agency what we're doing and the fulfillment delay, in terms of how long it actually takes to raise capital. It's a 3 to 6 month process, not even by our own fault, but just by how fast investors move once they do due diligence on a company. So on our side, it's just continuing to build this organization that we've developed. We've already made a couple hires now at this point. So we got people working for us. And so it's just about building out the team, really closing those deals because on the back end is when we really make a killing. Like all the money that we've made so far has been on front end fees, just getting clients to engage with us. Once we start making the back end fees, that's in the opportunity that I'm in. That's where we're looking at 100K in a month, 200K in a month, 500K in a month, just from closing a deal, right, for a client. And so that's really where we're focused right now, me and my business partner. And so that's, I'd say, what's next.
Fantastic. Good stuff, Luigi. Appreciate your time. And I'm sure people are going to see your face around somewhere.